Hi there, everyone. So today I want to talk to you about something that affects nearly every family, and that is sleep, screens, and behavior. And I mean, many parents, they're noticing that their children seem more emotional, more reactive, less focused, and more easily overwhelmed than expected. And when a child is struggling with attention, emotional regulation, they're having frequent meltdowns, it's really important to look beyond the behavior and say, hey, what might be happening underneath the surface here? So, today we're going to talk about some of the hidden drivers that can have a significant impact on how children feel, how they think, and how they behave each day. And we're going to talk about, why are they struggling more than ever? And if you think about it, today children, they're growing up in a very different environment than previous generations. They're being exposed to more screens, more artificial light, more indoor time, and more information. And often they get less unstructured outdoor play, especially more than children were 20 or 30 years ago. So at the same time, many children, they're sleeping less, they're spending less time in natural daylight, and they're living in a world that keeps their brains constantly stimulated. Now, this doesn't mean technology is bad. It doesn't mean that parents are doing anything wrong. It just simply means we're raising children in an environment that their developing brains and nervous systems weren't necessarily designed for. So when we understand how modern habits influence sleep, stress, mood, and attention, we can make small adjustments that support our children's well-being. So, one of the major concepts I want to discuss with you today is circadian rhythm. Now, circadian rhythm is the body's natural 24-hour biological clock. And this internal clock that we have, it helps regulate sleep, energy, hormones, appetite, mood, focus, and many, many other functions. So, when a child's circadian rhythm is supported, they often have an easier time with emotional regulation, attention, and overall resilience. So when that rhythm, when it becomes disrupted, you may start to see more challenges with behavior, mood, and sleep. So today my goal is just to create, well, it's not to create guilt or give you a long list of things to change because, most parents are already overwhelmed. So instead, I just want to help you understand some of the factors that influence behavior and provide simple, practical strategies that families can use. So you don't need perfection. Often, just a few small changes in daily rhythms can make a meaningful difference over time. Okay, so right now I just want to start by asking a few questions, and you don't have to, you don't have to answer every one of them. You can write these down if you'd like, and start to pay attention to these things. Just something to think about. Have you ever noticed that your child is more likely to have a meltdown when they're tired? And do transitions become harder at certain times of the day? So just pay attention to those little transitions. It could be coming home from school. It could be getting up early in the morning. It could be, just notice those different transitions and how they're handling those things. Because a lot of people say their kids are great at school, they're an angel, but then when they come home, they explode around their parents. All right, have you ever noticed that after screen time, your child seems more emotional, more reactive, or has a harder time settling into the next activity? And do they sometimes struggle to focus even when they want to? Or maybe they seem completely exhausted, but somehow still can't slow down or fall asleep. So for many parents, the answer is yes to at least one of these. And so one of the biggest mindset shifts we can make as parents is understanding that behavior doesn't happen in isolation. So when you see a meltdown or defiance or hyperactivity or an emotional outburst, it's easy just to focus on that behavior itself, but behavior is usually the output of what's happening inside the brain and body. So children don't usually separate their sleep, their nutrition, their stress, screen exposure, movement, emotions, and nervous system function into neat little categories. So all of those systems are working together all day long. So if you would like to, you could think of behavior as the tip of an iceberg. So the behavior is the part we can see. And underneath the surface are things like sleep quality, circadian rhythm, stress levels, sensory input, screen exposure, physical activity, emotional needs, and nervous system regulation. So when we only focus on the behavior, we may miss some of the factors that are contributing to it. So one example many parents relate to is the child who's just clearly tired but seems to get more energetic as the evening goes on. So you're thinking to yourself, how can they be bouncing off the walls when they're exhausted? And this often happens because an overtired nervous system can become overstimulated. So instead of slowing down, the body releases stress hormones to keep functioning. So what looks like hyperactivity or silliness or emotional intensity can sometimes be a sign that a child's system is actually running on empty. So today we're going to talk about how sleep, screens, light exposure, movement, and daily rhythms influence a child's ability to regulate their emotions and focus attention and navigate challenges. So remember, the goal isn't to find one thing to blame. The goal is just to understand the many factors that influence behavior so we can support our children even more effectively. Okay, so when most adults think about sleep deprivation, they usually imagine somebody yawning, sluggish, low energy, and ready for a nap. But children often respond very differently, and one of the reasons sleep issues can be overlooked is because sleep deprivation in kids doesn't always look like exhaustion. So in fact, many overtired children appear they're more active, more emotional, and more reactive. So I've heard parents say, there's no way my child is tired, they're bouncing off the walls. But sometimes that's actually one of the biggest clues that they're overtired. Now, why does this happen? When a child becomes overly tired, the body often tries to compensate by releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And these hormones help the child stay awake and push through fatigue. Now, the result is that instead of appearing sleepy, they may appear energized, restless, or emotionally intense. And one of the common signs of sleep deprivation is actually hyperactivity. So a tired child may constantly move, they may fidget, climb, jump, and have difficulty sitting still. And sometimes what looks like excess energy is actually a nervous system trying to stay alert. You may see aggression because sleep deprivation can also increase aggressive behaviors. All right, so children may become more irritable, they may argue more frequently, they may hit, yell, or react strongly to situations that normally wouldn't bother them. Their ability to pause and regulate emotions is reduced when the brain is tired. So you may see anxiety, and many parents are surprised to learn that poor sleep and anxiety go hand in hand. When children are overtired, their stress response system becomes more sensitive. They may worry more, become clingier, appear more fearful, or have a harder time coping with everyday challenges. You're going to see mood swings. That's another common sign. You may notice your child going from happy to frustrated to tearful very quickly. The emotional brakes in the brain simply aren't working as efficiently when a child is sleep deprived. Sleep deprivation can also look like defiance. A tired child may refuse directions, resist transitions, argue more often, and seem oppositional. But sometimes what appears to be defiance is actually a child whose brain lacks the capacity for flexibility and self-control in that moment. They may also have poor focus. Their focus and attention are also heavily affected by sleep. They may become easily distracted. They may forget instructions, struggle to complete tasks, and have difficulty staying engaged. This can impact learning, it can impact school performance, and just everyday responsibilities. And perhaps one of the most obvious signs is an increase in meltdowns. So when children are tired, their emotional threshold becomes lower. Small disappointments can trigger big reactions because the brain has less capacity to manage stress. So the most important takeaway from this slide is this, that overtired children often become more activated, not less. So instead of looking sleepy, they may look hyperactive, they may look emotional, impulsive, and anxious, or even defiant. And so when we learn to recognize these behaviors as potential signs of the nervous system being depleted, then we can begin looking at sleep as part of the solution rather than focusing on just correcting that behavior. All right, now let's shift our focus to screens. We just talked about sleep, so now I want to talk about screens a little bit. So this can be a very sensitive topic just because screens they're a normal part of everyday life right now. And most families use them. They can be used for educational purposes, entertainment, and sometimes it's just necessary. I do want to say that there was a time I think somebody may have judged a mom at the park who's on her phone thinking, oh, she's not watching her child play. But if you ever stop to think, maybe mom works and she has to take her work with her, and that's a way to get the child out to play and get some sunshine while she's also working. So we have to be less judgmental about that. So the goal of this discussion, like I said, it's not to create guilt or suggest that screens are inherently bad. And instead, it's just about understanding how screens interact with a child's developing brain and nervous system so we can make informed choices. So why are they so appealing? So one of the reasons screens are so powerful is that they're designed to capture and hold our attention. So whether it's a video game or social media or just an app, screens often provide experiences that are highly engaging and stimulating. So the first thing screens provide is constant novelty. The brain is naturally drawn to new information. So with screens, there's always another video, another image, another level, another notification, or another source of entertainment. So the brain receives a steady stream of new input without much effort. So compare that to activities like reading, building, drawing, or imaginative play, which require more sustained attention and engagement. So screens provide very fast rewards, and children can instantly access entertainment, feedback, achievements, and excitement. So games, they also provide points and rewards, and videos provide instant entertainment. There's apps that are often designed to keep engagement very high, and the brain begins to expect quick stimulation and immediate rewards. There's also the bright light. Many screens emit significant amounts of light, especially when viewed in darker environments. So our brains use light as information about what time of day it is. So that goes back to circadian rhythm and your own biological clock. So when children are exposed to bright screens, particularly in the evening, it can send signals to the brain that it should stay alert and awake, even when the child should be getting ready for bed. So it's like it's the middle of the day. Let's stay awake. So there's high stimulation. So screens also combine multiple forms of stimulation at once. There may be fast-moving images, bright colors, sounds, music, visual effects, and rapid scene changes. So this creates a highly stimulating experience for the nervous system. So after spending time in a highly stimulating environment, everyday activities can sometimes feel less rewarding by comparison. So things like homework, chores, reading, family conversations, or independent play, it seems slower and it seems like it requires more effort for them. And it's not that these activities have become less valuable, it's that the brain has just been exposed to a much higher level of stimulation. So for some children, the difference can lead to increased frustration, and parents may notice that transitions away from screens are very difficult. So a child who seemed calm during screen time may suddenly become emotional, irritable, or resistant when the screen is removed. So this doesn't happen to every child in the same way, but children who are younger, highly sensitive, or are already struggling with regulation often seem to be affected the most. So it's important to remember that every child responds differently. So the goal isn't necessarily to eliminate screens. The goal is to understand how screen exposure may be influencing mood, attention, sleep, and behavior so we can create a healthy balance. So as you think about your own child, consider these questions. So what happens when screen time ends, and how does your child behave after extended screen use? Are there certain types of screen activities that seem more stimulating than others? And often parents begin noticing patterns once they start paying attention. All right, so now that we've talked about why screens are so engaging, let's take a look at what some parents notice after screen time ends. So one of the most common questions I hear is, why does my child seem fine while they're on the screen, but they fall apart when it's time to turn it off? So the answer is often, it often has to do with how the nervous system responds to stimulation and transitions. So the nervous system, it doesn't stop instantly. So think about driving on the highway at 70 miles per hour, and if you suddenly pull over off the highway, your body and brain don't immediately shift into a relaxed state. So there's got to be a transition period. And the same thing can happen after highly stimulating screen activities. The brain may need time to shift from a fast-paced, high-input environment back into everyday life. And one thing parents may notice is increased irritability. So children may become more sensitive to requests, more easily frustrated, or more likely to argue after extended screen use. And this doesn't mean screens are always the cause of irritability, but for some children, high levels of stimulation can make it harder to regulate emotions afterwards. So transitions can be particularly challenging. Children may have difficulty moving from screens to, let's say, homework or dinner time or bath time, especially bedtime and family activities. So part of this challenge comes from leaving an activity that is highly rewarding and stimulating for one that requires more effort and self-regulation. And some children, they experience emotional outbursts when screen time ends. Parents may hear things like, just 5 more minutes, or I'm not done, or they may see crying, anger, or frustration. So while limits and boundaries are still important, it's helpful to recognize that transitions away from highly stimulating activities can genuinely feel difficult for a developing brain. And after long periods of sitting and focusing on a screen, some children become restless. They may pace or fidget. They may seek movement, have difficulty settling into quieter activities. I mean, the nervous system, it may still be carrying some of the activation from the screen experience. So many parents also notice that screen use later in the day can make bedtime a lot more challenging. Kids may take longer to fall asleep, have a harder time calming down, and seem tired but unable to settle down. So part of this may be related to stimulation and part may be related to the light exposure. And we're going to discuss that in the next section. But just remember, it's important to remember that not every child responds the same way. Some children seem relatively unaffected by screen exposure, and others show clear changes in mood, attention, or behavior. And the children who tend to be most affected are often those who are already highly sensitive, easily overstimulated, or struggling with regulation and experiencing sleep challenges. So for these children, even small changes in screen habits can sometimes make a noticeable difference. So rather than asking, are screens good or bad, I encourage parents to become curious observers. So ask yourself, what happens before screen time? What happens during screen time? And what happens afterward? Your child will often tell you through their behavior how their nervous system is responding. So think about your own child and just have you noticed differences in their mood, their flexibility, or behavior after screen use? Are certain types of screens or certain times of day more challenging than others? Let's say the morning versus the evening, or when it gets very close to bedtime. So these observations can provide valuable clues about what your child's nervous system needs. All right, so now we're getting to one of my favorite parts. We're going to talk about light. So when most people think about sleep, they think about bedtime. But one of the biggest influences on sleep actually starts much earlier in the day with light. So light is one of the most powerful signals that helps set your child's internal body clock, also known as their circadian rhythm. Now, inside the brain is a tiny area that acts like a master clock, and its job is to help coordinate daily rhythms, including sleep and wake, and energy levels, hormone production, mood, attention, and even appetite. And one of the primary ways this clock knows what time it is, it comes from light entering the eyes. So the morning light is the wake-up signal. So when children get natural light in the morning, their brain receives a very clear message. It's daytime. It's time to wake up and be alert. And morning sunlight helps increase alertness, support healthy energy levels, strengthen circadian rhythms, and set the stage for better sleep later that night. And one of the simplest habits families can adopt is getting outside for a few minutes in the morning whenever possible. And notice I just said a few minutes. It makes all the difference. So evening darkness it's the sleep signal, and as the day progresses and natural light decreases, the brain receives a different message. It says the day is ending. It's time to prepare for rest. In response, the body begins shifting towards sleep mode. This process helps children feel naturally sleepy at bedtime, and this is why darkness matters. It's because our bodies evolved for thousands of years with a very predictable pattern: bright light during the day and darkness at night. And the brain uses this contrast to regulate sleep and wakefulness. So when that contrast becomes blurred, sleep can become a lot more difficult. And this is the challenge of modern life. So today, many children spend so much more time indoors and are exposed to artificial light long after the sun goes down. So this includes things like television, tablets, phones, computers, and bright household lighting. So the brain doesn't always distinguish between natural light and artificial light. Instead, it interprets bright light as signal to stay alert. So how artificial light can affect sleep. So when children are exposed to bright light in the evening, it can make it harder for the brain to fully shift into sleep mode. So you may notice things like bedtime resistance, difficulty falling asleep, restlessness at night, and feeling tired in the morning. And this doesn't mean one evening of screen use will ruin sleep. It's a factor that can influence the body's natural rhythms. So the good news is that supporting healthy light exposure is often very simple. So think about it. More natural light during the day and less bright light in the evening. So the goal isn't perfection again. It's helping the brain receive clearer signals about when to be awake and when to rest. So as you think about your child's day or their daily routine, I want you to ask yourself, how much time do they spend outdoors? How much time are they outdoors in the morning? What does it look like in your home before bedtime? And are screens typically part of the evening routine? So these small details can have a surprisingly powerful impact on sleep and behavior. All right, so we've talked about sleep and light, but now let's connect these ideas through something called circadian rhythm. So circadian rhythm is simply your child's internal 24-hour body clock. And every person has one, and it's working all the time, even when we're not thinking about it. And this internal clock helps coordinate many important functions throughout the day and night. And it's really more, circadian rhythm is about more than just sleep. So many people think circadian rhythm is only about sleep, but it actually affects much more than bedtime. This internal clock influences when we feel alert, when we feel tired, when hormones are released, and when we feel hungry, and how well we focus and how stable our mood is. So in many ways, circadian rhythm acts like the conductor of an orchestra. It's helping all of the body systems work together at the right time. And one of its most obvious jobs is regulating sleep. So when circadian rhythms when circadian rhythms are functioning well, children will naturally become more alert during the day and sleepier as evening approaches. So when rhythms become disrupted, falling asleep and waking up can become more difficult. Energy levels, they also follow a rhythm. So most children should experience periods of alertness and activity during the day and gradually wind down in the evening. So when those rhythms become disrupted, children may seem tired during the day and wide awake at night. So hormones are heavily influenced by circadian rhythms. See, hormones that support wakefulness, growth, stress response, and sleep, they all follow daily patterns. And these hormonal shifts help prepare the body for different activities throughout the day. Even hunger and digestion have circadian patterns. So the body expects food at certain times and processes nutrients differently throughout the day. So regular meal timing can actually help reinforce healthy circadian rhythms. And mood and focus are also connected to these rhythms. So when children are well rested and their body clock is aligned, they often have better emotional regulation and attention. And when rhythms are disrupted, parents may notice more irritability, emotional ups and downs, or difficulty concentrating. Again, I always want to emphasize something important here, that the goal is not to try to be perfect. It's not perfection. We're not trying to create a perfectly scheduled life or eliminate every late night vacation, special event, or family celebration. And, children, they are resilient. And what matters most is the overall pattern, not occasional exceptions. So the goal is helping the body understand two simple messages: when it's time to be awake and when it's time to rest. Some of the strongest signals we can give the body include morning sunlight, consistent meal times, daily movement, and reduced stimulation before bed, and a predictable bedtime routine. And these simple habits help strengthen the body's natural rhythm. So as you think about your family's routine, I want you to ask yourself, does my child's day send clear signals about when to be awake and when to rest? There's no perfect schedule, but even small improvements in daily rhythm can have a positive effect on sleep, mood, and behavior. All right, so this is some of my favorite information. It's the light spectrum throughout the day. So you can clearly see the differences in sunrise, solar noon, and sunset. And the fact that you don't have to stay outside all day, the benefit is getting a little bit of each. Getting some of that morning sunlight that signals, hey, it's the morning, let's eat, let's get our day started. And then solar noon, it's going to support alertness, focus, productivity, and it is the highest intensity overall. And then as the blue light starts to go down when it gets toward evening, and then you have the deep reds and oranges in the evening that signal, hey, it's time to wind down, it's time to get ready for bed. You can think of things like things that would mimic sunset would be like candlelight, firelight. Some people use things like salt rock lamps. We're going to talk about things like that to help you create that in your home in the evening instead of overhead LEDs and overhead lights that mimic solar noon and confuse you. So since we just talked about screens, you can see how this right here, if a child, it's bedtime is an hour from now and they're looking at screens, they're going to get the signal that it's time to be awake, it's time to be productive. But we're going to talk about ways that you can work around this. And that's why we're not saying screens are bad. We're just going to learn how to work around it. So let's go to the next slide just to talk a little more about the benefits of each of these. So this supports healthy wake up. Like I said, the warm, soft light helps gently stimulate cortisol and release to promote, this gently stimulates cortisol release to promote alertness without stress. And it improves mood. So morning light increases serotonin, which supports a positive mood and emotional well-being. That is huge. And that is one of the things I noticed the most when I started getting myself a morning light. I always thought I wasn't a morning person until I started feeling these benefits right here, just the positive mood. and it regulates your circadian rhythm. So early light exposure sets your internal clock and supporting better sleep at night. And it's calming and grounding. So the lower intensity and warmer tones promote relaxation and sense of calm. And it's gentle on the eyes and skin. People think they have to stare right at the horizon, but you do not have to do that. You just step outside. And if you can't step outside, let's say you live in an apartment, you can't get out there, open a window. Now, I know it's hot in some places, or it may be cold. It depends on the time of year. But just simply opening the window. Sometimes I'm upstairs. I get up, I have a little stool by my window where the sun rises in the east. And I'll open it and I'll just sit in the window. And it really doesn't take long for, to start feeling the benefits of that. You can even do that in your children's room. If children don't want to wake up, just open their window and let the light shine in. I know many people who do that. Then you've got solar noon. So as the blue starts to come up more in the sky, you're going to have the full spectrum light with strong blue and red wavelengths. It enhances alertness, focus, and cognitive performance. It supports productivity and performance. So it's ideal light for deep work, learning, and problem solving. It supports vitamin D production. I'm going to show you several apps that tell you when you have optimal vitamin D production, depending on where you are on the planet. That's something else we could talk about. So UVB rays are strongest around midday, helping your body produce vitamin D for bone, immune, and mood health, which is very important. Now, a lot of kids on these tests have low vitamin D levels, which that can cause issues in itself. Also, vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, so you want to make sure you're getting healthy fats along with vitamin D. They go hand in hand, and it strengthens the immune system. Natural light exposure supports immune function and overall resilience, and improves overall health. So associated with lower risk of chronic disease, better metabolic health, and improved well-being. So the best way to enjoy is to get outside between 10 and 2 for 15 to 30 minutes and avoid overexposure. There are people who do spring challenges because it's one of the best times to get your body used to the sun. They call it building a sun callus, where you go out for little bits of time outside with your skin exposed to get your body used to the light. And before the heat of summer, when a lot of people sleep in all morning and they jump up and they go to the pool and they stay out for 4 hours and they burn their skin. So that's not the way to enjoy the sun at solar noon. And here we have the sunset. It promotes relaxation. Its red and orange light signal to your brain that it's time to wind down. It supports melatonin production. So lower blue light allows melatonin to rise naturally, supporting better sleep quality. It also reduces stress. So warm light in the evening helps lower cortisol and promotes a calm mind and body. And of course, it's easy on the eyes, lower intensity, and encourages mindfulness. So sunset is a natural cue to slow down, reflect, and connect. So the best way to enjoy is to spend 10 to 30 minutes outside in the hour before sunset. Like I said, there's apps, and I'm going to go over those that show you in detail what time you have UVA available, what time you have UVB available in your area. And, you can learn tips and tricks to work around that. And we'll talk more about that as well. All right, so let's talk for a moment about the difference between the classroom lighting and sunlight. And you can think about this with office work as well. All right, so a lot of kids get up and they jump on the bus or they get to school, and sometimes it's before the sun even rises. So they get up, they stare at their phone screens. It's signaling it's the middle of the day, and they're getting ready. Sometimes they eat a healthy breakfast with good protein, healthy fats. Sometimes they don't. So if they're getting up before the sunrise, there's ways to use lower lighting. I'll show you some different tools and little lamps that kids can use that are more amber light or incandescent light bulbs to get ready. Maybe wear blue blockers if they're going to stare at their screen before school, and eat a healthy breakfast with protein and healthy fats that'll signal also that, hey, the day has started. Your cortisol is rising. You get up, you're going to eat that protein. It's going to help that cortisol spike, help with stress. It's going to help your day get started better. You're going to be more alert during the day than if you get up and stare at your phone with your bare eyes, and then you jump on the bus and you get in a classroom that looks like this. The overhead LED lights. And they flicker, they irritate the nervous system. And most kids are on computers today in schools. They don't even really use textbooks anymore. So this is the difference. You have the full spectrum outside. Now, I know kids can't sit outside all day and learn. And even if you homeschool, your kids aren't going to be outside all day, nor you don't have to be outside all day. The thing is, I wish they would bring to more classrooms is to take more breaks. Go outside and stretch. Take some deep breaths. Let the sunlight hit your eyes. It's all about balance. It would be nice if they could have lower lighting sometimes. Now, the middle of the day it's okay, but in the morning, maybe have some lamps, and then the middle of the day, use the overhead lights. And then in the evening, if it's winter, some kids don't see the sun setting. It's getting dark by the time they get home and eat. They have homework back on their screens, and we wonder why our kids are irritated and dysregulated. So, in a perfect world, yes, we could change all that, but we're just going to have to learn to work around it. But I wanted you to see the difference in the wavelengths of light. So, yeah, right here, like I said, the full spectrum, strong in blue, strong in red, supports alertness, mood, and focus, natural and balanced. I love the word balanced. And right here, missing many wavelengths, weak in green and yellow, uneven peaks, the blue spike, which is very dysregulating, can cause eye strain, fatigue, and headaches, and a less natural feeling, make you feel fuzzy and weird, dysregulated. And I actually have had an eye doctor who specializes in quantum biology that talked about they see more eye issues in children than ever before. All right, so now that we've set the foundation for the morning, let's talk about the afternoon. It's really about protecting the rhythm that you've started. So this is the time of day when many children begin to dip in energy and become more irritable or struggle with focus and emotional regulation. So rather than seeing this as just bad behavior or afternoon crankiness, we can view it as a signal that the nervous system may need some support. So one of the most powerful supports in the afternoon is continued exposure to natural light and outdoor time. So even short bursts of outdoor play can help reset attention, improve mood, and support energy regulation. So outdoor environments also naturally give the brain more space to regulate compared to indoor environments that are often more structured, noisy, or screen-filled. You also saw those pictures before where just the non-natural light flickering can cause some irritation. And it really helps just a little short burst of energy outside, even getting your shoes off, getting your feet in the ground, and do some grounding, earthing, whatever you call it. There's really proven benefits to getting outside and letting your feet touch the ground. So movement is one of the most effective ways to help children regulate their nervous systems. So when children move their bodies, they're not just burning energy, they're actually helping the brain organize and regulate input. And movement also supports focus, emotional regulation, stress release, and sensory integration. So this is why many children actually behave better after recess, free play, or physical activity. Also, hydration is often overlooked, but it plays a surprisingly important role in mood and cognitive function. I mean, even mild dehydration can affect things like energy levels, concentration, irritability, and headaches. So simple, consistent hydration throughout the afternoon can support a more stable nervous system. So some kids will wait and they just chug water when really you're supposed to be taking sips all throughout the day. So it's important to have those water breaks and emphasize hydration. You also want to focus on protein-rich meals and snacks. I know children can be very picky eaters. If you look into pairing foods where maybe they get the protein-rich foods before their favorite snack, that usually helps. So, I mean, because what children eat in the afternoon can also influence behavior and energy regulation. So let's just say they've been in a classroom all day, they come home and they start eating junk food. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster sometimes. So you want protein-rich snacks because they help support more stable blood sugar levels, which can in turn support things like mood stability and focus, reduced energy crashes, and better emotional regulation. And again, the goal here is not strict dieting or perfection, but just simply supporting steadier energy for their developing brains. So afternoons are also a common time for screen use, which can sometimes make transition and regulation more difficult for certain children. So taking intentional breaks from screens allows the nervous system to reset. So even short pauses from digital stimulation can help children return to more grounded activities with better focus and flexibility. And one of the most important ideas on this slide is that movement helps regulate the nervous system naturally. So when children are dysregulated, restless, overwhelmed, or unfocused, movement is often one of the simplest and most effective tools that we have. It helps discharge stress, reset attention, and bring the brain back into balance. So I also want to acknowledge that afternoons can be very busy. I know families have school pickups, activities, homework, work schedules, and responsibilities. So this again it's not about creating a perfect afternoon routine. It's about looking for small opportunities to support regulation within the reality of your daily life. So as you think about your child's afternoons, I want you to consider, Are there natural opportunities for movement? How often are screens used during this time? Is hydration consistent throughout the day? Do we see behavior changes at this time of the day that might signal fatigue or overstimulation? And often small adjustments in the afternoon can significantly improve evening behavior and bedtime ease. All right, everybody, we're getting near the end. I want to thank you for hanging out with me. I appreciate you for sticking this out with me. All right, so we're going to create a circadian friendly evening. So we're going to prepare the brain for sleep. We're going to do this naturally. All right, so now that we're going to be moving into the evening, which is really about helping the brain shift gears, if the morning is about activating the body and setting the clock, the evening is all about signaling safety, slowing down, and preparing for rest. So one of the biggest challenges for children today is that evenings are often still highly stimulating. So even after a full day of school, social interaction, learning, and activity, many children go straight into more stimulation, screens, bright lights, or a busy household energy. And this can make it harder for the brain to recognize that the day is ending. So one of the simplest and most powerful evening cues is lighting. So dimmer lights help signal to the brain that it's time to wind down. So bright overhead lights can keep the nervous system more alert than we've realized. So even small changes like using lamps instead of overhead lighting can support a calmer transition toward bedtime. So the evening is also a time to reduce high energy stimulation. Now, this doesn't mean eliminating fun or connection. It means choosing activities that help the brain slow down rather than speed it up. So examples might include avoiding intense games, competitive activities, or overly exciting content close to bedtime. So screen exposure in the evening can be particularly stimulating for many children, and this is due to both the mental stimulation and the light exposure we've discussed earlier. So for some families, reducing or removing screens in the final hour or two before bed can make a noticeable difference in how quickly and easily children fall asleep. So reading together is one of the most supportive bedtime activities. It helps slow down the nervous system, promote connection, reduce stimulation, and create a predictable wind down routine. Even older children can benefit from quiet reading time before sleep. And children's brains, they thrive on predictability. So a consistent bedtime routine helps the nervous system recognize patterns and feel safe. So this might include a simple sequence like bath, pajamas, brush teeth, story, and then bed. And it doesn't need to be long or complicated, it just needs to be consistent. So the key message on this slide is that the brain thrives on consistency. So when children experience a predictable rhythm each evening, their nervous system begins to learn. This is how we transition from awake to asleep. And over time, this can make bedtime smoother and less stressful for both children and parents. So I also want to acknowledge that not every evening will be perfect. Life happens. You have sports, you have events, you have travel, late nights, you have cats looking into your camera. And disruptions are normal. I mean, what perfect timing for my cat to disrupt us here. So what matters most is the overall pattern across the week, not a single evening. So like I said, you may have sporting events, and you just learn to create balance and work around these things. So what signals are we sending to the brain before bed? Are we helping the nervous system slow down or speed up? And what is one small change we could make to create a calmer wind down? Okay, so let's talk about blue blocking glasses. I am a firm believer in how powerful these are, and I'll tell you why. Because when I started using them, I could fall asleep so easily at night. And also, if you get used to wearing them and then you take them off, you notice how intense blue light can really be and how it almost hurts your eyes. It took me a few to convince my children, but I wanted to talk about the difference in case you didn't know. So the yellow ones you would wear, let's say you're an office worker and you're staring at a screen all day. To just help with the effects of artificial blue light, I wear yellow during the day. When the sun has set, you wear the orange ones. This mimics candlelight, firelight, and it just helps your eyes to not feel like it's the middle of the day anymore. So if you have children and they're going to be sneaking on their phones, or let's just say they have homework, they're not sneaking, you're letting them read or do something on their iPads or the iPhones, or they're watching TV, then they're going to want the orange glasses to do so. Most kids won't fight you on that, and I'm telling you, when they start wearing them, they'll say, hey, I didn't really notice a difference, but I need my glasses on because my eyes hurt from staring at that artificial blue light. I honestly, and I'll always be honest with you, I do not use the red ones, but an hour before bed, let's say if I was up working really late and I really need to get to bed in an hour, you should probably wear the red ones. But these are just a tool to use. I mean, I also have something called the Iris app on my computer, and it creates an amber light across my computer. I honestly do both. During the day, I wear these, I have the Iris app on, and then when the sun is setting, I wear the orange ones until bedtime. And if there's somebody that's going to have the TV on, or, let's just face it, people are going to turn on lights and they're going to do things throughout the house. And you just have to use your tools to adapt. But I highly suggest talking your children into at least wearing the orange ones when the sun has set. So that's just some of the tools. And I've listed these down here. You can get children's glasses from here. That's where I got my kids' glasses. And Viva Rays are some of my favorite. I got my readers from them. I really love them. I have the yellow and the orange from them. And I also have a pair from Block Blue Light, and I've been happy with every single one of those. Okay, and as far as lighting in your home, I know some people who just had a newborn baby and they put these in their room because there's nothing like being, you have to get up through the night with your child to feed your newborn baby. You can't say, hey, don't wake me up. I don't want to be exposed to light. The worst thing a mom can do is honestly scroll on her phone in the middle of the night. It's just not a great idea. The best thing you can do is get one of these salt rock lamps with the integrated dimmer switch on it so you can just gently turn it up. And in the evenings, I love these Edison style incandescent bulbs. I got them on Amazon. I bought some little table lamps so they're at the lower level in the home, and I use these all throughout the house. They create a very nice warm light. And I actually got some, I don't have it on here, but I got some lamps from Amazon that they have lowest level, and then, so as the sun's setting, I can dimmer it up or down as I need to go to bed. So that's a great way to create lighting in your home. You can also get some amber night lights to put throughout your house. So if you have to get up and go to the bathroom at night, those are great. I actually got a pack of amber light bulbs for $8.99, so you don't have to spend a fortune to do that. Real quick, let me go back here. Soleil Well right here, they have some little reading lamps that are battery operated. So if you want to check those out, they're great for reading at night, and also in the morning if your child has to get up before the sun is up to go to school. Those little lamps are great for turning on and going throughout the house and getting ready in the morning. And if they're going to look at their phone in the morning, I would highly suggest using the orange blue blocking glasses before the sun rises. And at school, if they're allowed to, and they're looking at computers all day, these are very useful. Like I said, do not wear them outside. Do not wear these while you're driving. Just a little CYA there. All right, so as we start to wrap up this section, I just want to bring everything back to something very important. This is not about doing everything perfectly, and in fact, trying to do everything at once often leads to overwhelm, burnout, and even inconsistency. So many parents hear information like this and immediately they think, I need to fix our sleep, remove screens, change our routines, adjust meals, and overhaul our entire schedule. But that's kind of an all or nothing approach, and it's very rarely sustainable. So I want you to just focus on one change. So just one small shift at a time. Something simple, something realistic, something you can actually maintain in your current life. So here are a few examples of small changes that can have meaningful impact. So morning outdoor light, even 5 to 10 minutes outside in the morning can help set the body's internal clock. Earlier bedtime, even 15 to 30 minutes earlier, can improve mood, focus, and behavior the next day. How about screen-free meals? This supports connection, digestion, and nervous system regulation. What about no screens before bed? This can make a big difference in how quickly a child is able to fall asleep. Or a family walk after dinner. This supports digestion, connection, movement, and circadian rhythm. What about consistent wake time? One of the most powerful anchors for the body's clock. And each of these is simple on its own, but powerful when done consistently. Not perfectly, but consistently. So one of the biggest takeaways from today's presentation is this. Small changes done consistently often outperform big changes done occasionally. I'm going to say that one more time. Small changes done consistently often outperform big changes done occasionally. So it's not about doing everything perfectly for a whole week. It's about doing a few supported things most days. So I also want to emphasize that real life will always include variation. There's going to be late nights, travel, illness, school events, and busy seasons, and that is completely normal. So what matters is the overall pattern across time, not perfection in every moment. And if you take nothing else away from this today, I hope this. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to support your child's nervous system. You just need to find one or two small places where you can create more rhythm, more consistency, and more support. And as you think about your family, ask yourself, what is one small change that feels realistic right now? And where could we create a little more consistency? And what would feel supportive without feeling overwhelming? And just start there. So in the final section, we're just going to pull all this together and focus on key takeaways and discussion so you leave today with clarity, not complexity. All right, so now I'm going to shift this into a reflection exercise. So this is where we move from information into personal application. So looking at your own child, your own home, and your own daily rhythms. So as you go through these questions, I want to emphasize that this is not about judgment or blame. So every family has different schedules, stressors, resources, and realities. So the goal here is simply awareness. So let's walk through a few questions together. First, is my child getting enough sleep? Think about both bedtime and wake time, and not just how many hours they are in bed, but how restful that sleep actually is. Do they wake up refreshed or still tired and dysregulated? Next, how much outdoor light do they receive? Are they getting morning sunlight within the first hour of waking? Do they spend time outside during the day, or is most of their time indoors under artificial light? All right, and what happens after screen time? Do you notice changes in mood or behavior or flexibility after screens? Are transitions more difficult afterwards? And this isn't about eliminating screens, it's about noticing patterns. And are they moving enough? Children are designed for movement. So do they have regular opportunities to run, play, climb, stretch, or simply move their bodies throughout the day? Or are long periods of sitting more common? And finally, is our evening routine calming or stimulating? Does the evening help your child wind down, or does it stay busy, bright, and stimulating right up until bedtime? So even small shifts in the evening environment can significantly impact sleep quality. And as you reflect on all of these areas, you may start to notice patterns. So for many families, it's not one single factor, it's a combination of small things that either support or overwhelm a child's nervous system. And you might also realize that some days are better than others, and that's completely normal. This isn't about perfection or getting everything right, which I've said many times. It's about noticing what helps your child feel more regulated and what seems to make things harder. If one or two of these questions stood out to you, that's valuable information. So you don't need to change everything right now. You can just simply start with awareness and then choose one small adjustment that feels realistic for your family. And in our final slide, we'll bring everything together into a few key takeaways so you leave today with clarity and not overwhelmed. All right, as we come toward the end of today's presentation, thank you for being with me through all of this. I want to bring everything we've discussed into a few simple ground takeaways. And if you remember nothing else, I just want you to remember the patterns we've explored, not as rules, but as clues. Behavior is a clue. First, behavior is often a clue, so when children struggle with emotional regulation, attention, or behavior, it's not just something to correct, it's information. And behavior is communication. It's the nervous system expressing what it needs or how it's functioning in that moment. And second, sleep impacts emotional regulation. Sleep is not just rest, it's brain restoration. And when sleep is disrupted or insufficient, we often see bigger emotions, lower frustration tolerance, more impulsivity, can't say that word, reduced flexibility, and even small improvements in sleep can create noticeable changes in behavior. And third, screens influence nervous system stimulation. So screens are highly engaging, fast-paced, and stimulating for the brain. So for some children, especially those who are sensitive or already struggling with regulation, screens can make transitions, mood, and focus more challenging. Again, it's not about judgment, it's about awareness. And fourth, light helps set the body's clock. Light is one of the strongest signals the brain uses to regulate sleep and wake cycles. Morning light helps wake the brain up. Evening darkness helps the brain wind down. And when this rhythm is supported, many other systems, mood, energy, focus, they tend to improve as well. And finally, small daily habits can support better moods, focus, and resilience. This entire presentation is not about big, overwhelming changes. It's about small, consistent shifts. Morning light, more movement, calmer evenings, earlier wind down routines, mindful screen use. So over time, these small habits can have meaningful impact on how a child feels and behaves. So if I could summarize everything into one idea, it would be this. So when we support the body's natural rhythms, we support the brain's ability to regulate behavior. And I also want to acknowledge something important. Parenting is already full. And this information is not meant to add pressure. Even one small change is enough to start shifting things in a positive direction. I just want to really thank you for being here. I hope it brings light into your life and helps with some questions that you may have had about behaviors and dysregulation. And if you have any questions, please reach out and I will be happy to go over those questions with you. And again, thank you for being here.